what I remember from PHP. Yeah. Okay, Joera,
Floor is mine.
So floor is yours.
Hello, my name is Joera. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to speak here. I briefly want to introduce myself first, and then I want to show you a project I'm working on, which is a website for the new metro line is being built in Amsterdam, the Noord-Zuid line. And I'm using both WordPress and Angular, which is, well, people have done that before, but at least I'm going to show you how I'm doing this. And when I present the project, I'll first have a few slides that show you what I'm doing and why I made the choice to use Angular. And then in the second part, we'll just look at the website and the code. But first, a little introduction. I didn't go to any programming school. I actually went to university and became a cultural anthropologist, which means that while you're watching me, I'm also observing something called the Sanoma tribe, and they have a ritual called like the Sanoma knowledge exchange. And I also heard about some kind of voodoo symbol, which is called SaKE, and I'm especially curious about that. After university, I tried to be a Russia expert for a few years. Long story short, I didn't find a good position. It was hard to make money. And while I was doing that, I was making websites for myself. And I found out that I could do that for other people and earn better money. So I became a freelancer. And it started off with learning CSS, and then learned how the PHP was and how I can just call up a title and a content from a post in WordPress. And then you learn about Bootstrap, like a Twitter Bootstrap framework, and you learn about jQuery. And just slowly, I gradually learned myself a little bit how to code. I'm not super talented, I'm not super good. So if there's one thing you can take away from my presentation, is that everybody can learn how to code. Freelance, yeah. Sometimes you think it's like that, but actually it's like 12 hours a day of this. Okay, so far the introduction. The title, WordPress and Angular. I'm using both on a project. How does that look like? So basically we have a separation of concerns. So we have just a traditional backend, one URL, admin.bijnemiema.nl, which is going to be the URL. Still in development, so you can't actually access it. That's one side, and the other side is just a publicly available website. So the traditional WordPress backend is PHP, and most of the process is happening on the server side. And the website, what we call the front end, most of the stuff is Angular, so it's JavaScript, and all the processes, all the computation, the templating and stuff happens within the browser, which is what we call the client side. They talk to each other with an API which sends through JSON data, and it's quite simple to hook up. WordPress had like several plugins you can just put on, and it has an API. And together, maybe you already see, it's a smiley face. I'm pretty happy with how it works, and especially it's the separation of concerns. They both do what they're good at, or at least they're successful in. WordPress, many people use it, so if you have a team of people working like editors writing stories, they know how to use it. And especially in the case of this client, they had been using WordPress for 3-4 years, so there was a database with 1,700 articles and tens of thousands of comments. So we could just keep that and build something more exciting on top. For you who haven't seen like what it looks like to send data on like something like a JSON API, it's just the gibberish that WordPress sends. I'm querying a post, and you see a title, a content, and we got attachments. From inside the web app, I can just request the data. I can go to the API. If I get the data, I can store it in the browser. So if a person within the same session goes back to the same page, it's already there. And even when he comes back a few days later, we already have the data to show it to the person. So we can still show something up pretty quickly. In Wordpress specific case with the API, that gibberish is generated by WordPress PHP. So if you have a database with 1700 articles in there, that generation of that thing still takes 3-4 seconds. So what I'm doing is that when a post is saved or a comment is published or a post is deleted, I call the API, the thing, and it just stores the same information within a file. So the website goes first to the file, which is just a little bit faster than going to the API. Before doing this, well, not actually before, because I just wanted to do it, but now I have to explain why I chose Angular. Then you get down into this kind of debate where you have people say, no, in most processes you have to do server-side, much more efficient. And other people, which I am now, say, okay, no, but we can also do it on client-side. So let's briefly see what the arguments are. Server-side, which is probably also many of your websites, how they're done. People say, no, we have to include everybody. Everybody has, it doesn't matter if you have a fancy laptop, everybody has to be able to see their website, and we can deliver that. For example, a couple of years ago, Twitter, which is of course famous for being app and going client-side, they decided to go back to the server-side. Because they had like a new target audience in all these developing countries where the smartphones aren't as good. So they went back to the client, to the server side to say, okay, we can, even on computers with less computing power, we can still deliver quality, a good experience. I say, but the browsers, they're getting better. Also, it's a different way of what you look at efficiency. How I imagine most of your websites are being efficient is that you say, okay, we generate some kind of page cache with varnish or whatever cool new thing, and that's what we deliver to the visitor of the website, and that's our system. If you're working with a web app like something with Angular, you can say, okay, maybe it's not so bad if that initial page load is like 1 second or 2 seconds longer, but afterwards we can use this local storage, we can keep the data in the browser, and we can actually have much more interactivity, which I'll show you later. And maybe we can also get rid of that ugly page refresh, that hiccups you see all the time when you change your URL. Even more important for you to consider, I think, is the SEO. That the way you're working on with search, you know how SEO works. Your page up, the page gets delivered to the browser of the user, and all the description fields, they're all included. If we send a template to the browser and it's empty, there's no content in there, Google cannot index anything. Now Google has been saying that they're also indexing JavaScript, basically that they're compiling the website and then indexing it, but we're not really sure how it works. So for the time being, if you go all the way client-side, SEO can be a risk. There are also solutions, but that's another story. The project I'm working on, which is this metro line. Those of you who've been in Amsterdam a little bit longer may remember 2007. On the Vijzelgracht, a few houses collapsed, or rather there were some cracks appeared in the walls. The whole project came to a standstill. Politicians were debating whether they should stop the whole project, and at that time, the whole communication department changed, and they kind of went for a new philosophy, which was more transparent and inviting people to come into the tunnels. And that has kind of changed the whole public perception of this project, which first was like something utterly stupid to do and lots of money to be thrown onto it, which, what would we get back to it? We could travel to the north of Amsterdam. And now it's something some people are quite enthusiastic about and see as a, something we will accomplish, and also quite interesting to see what we will do with mobility in Amsterdam for the future. But there is one thing that was happening when I started with this like a couple of months ago, is that all the cool construction part of the project is done. The tunnels have been dug, the stations are almost finished, and so there are not much more tunnels to invite people to come look at. You cannot go to, hey, we're opening our construction sites, look how transparent we are. We cannot do that anymore. And there are also not tough or construction workers you can take nice pictures of. They're all gone. It's all, the rest of the journey is ICT, fire security, test driving the metro lines. So how can we still be transparent? And I thought the only way to do that is use data visualizations. If the test driving, we can try to visualize the data of the test driving. ICT process, who knows, and Angular does that quite well. The other part is that they started having comments on the website, opening the articles for comments, which for a government website is kind of novel to do. And they've been pretty successful in that, so they wanted to extend that. They wanted to be like more interactive, also Angular. The other concern is that my target audience is the Netherlands. I believe we have good bandwidth, we have modern browsers. The worst browsers are probably in the offices of the government itself. So, if it works there, it's okay. And we're not selling sneakers. So, for SEO concerns, it's not a priority. If somebody looks for Metro of North Sideline, they will find us. We're not selling, we're not competing really. So, that is these deliberations together. I thought, okay, let's give this a try. What's the difference between Angular and another JavaScript framework? Essentially, we have data binding, which means that if I have data and I have a template on the browser, they're sent separately to the browser, and then the data is injected into the template. But what if the data gets injected to the template, but then the template can change something in the data which is being reflected in the template again, which I'm going to show you. So this is the simple Angular example of what they're doing. How big do you see this? Yeah. So we have data, which is here is like stored into the template, but it can come from another source. Name, last name. And we have an input field, which is here. And the input field is bound to the variable first name. So if here below, I already entered my own name, but if I go Sanoma, I immediately get back, see above, I can see Sanoma. So the template, that is the input field, talks to the data, the variable first name, and it is immediately reflected back. This is very simple. But, some people think it's cool. I think it's cool. This is, so I'm going to show you how I use that principle on the comment section and the interactivity there. This is the homepage. We've chosen to basically the current with the latest articles and the discussion that's going on. So here we have the latest 250 comments on the website, just spread over all the different posts. Well, now it's all the 250. So let's say that I would like to filter this list and find posts that use, they're about our airport, Schiphol. So just like the example before, I just used the input field, Schiphol, and now I got all the topics which have Schiphol in there. You know, it's just a few of them. Of course, you can do this with jQuery or any other thing, but Angular is especially good at it, and I'm going to show you how it does it. Okay, so here we have our input field again, over here. And we bind that input field to a variable called zoekopdracht content, so search term content. I especially like to use Dutch words. I'm sorry for the audience. So we bind that everything. When I entered Schiphol, zoekopdracht content, the variable is now Schiphol. Then we have what Angular calls the nj repeat, which is basically like a for loop, which this loops through all the comments, these 250 comments, and on it we have a filter called filter reacties, and we enter that zoekopdracht content into the filter. So Schiphol is injected into the filter. Because it's a custom filter, there's a separate file where I just made that filter, you know, which basically says for all the items go through it. If the word matches the search term, return it. And no more code needed. So we just used a search term, but I can, for example, we have here, let's say, okay, this is a post, and the post is written by Alain. And we also know that it's in, the comment is posted, is added to a post called the Metrogevoel van Washington. So I can also, the same principle, if I press on Alain, I get all his posts, or if I press on the, I just get Goeiedag. How this works is basically, it's the same principle, is that instead of using, instead of entering something in the input field, I'm entering a post ID or the name of the author, which can happen through an nj-click, which is basically the same as like an on-click in jQuery. All in all, I'm pretty excited that I can make like this interactive kind of widget style thing forum based on the normal WordPress commenting system. I can also have, like, if I want to reply to this person, I already know to which post I want to reply, and I can even add his name in there. Yeah. So far for the commenting, but what can we do with templates or the layout of an article? Here we have in the article as we presented it in the beta version, which we offered to see to some of the followers on the website. And we got this, you know, impressive visual intro header, and we got the latest comment here. And if we go down, we got the text is separated with images or a graph, or images again, or a graph, because I just wanted that if they wrote a post, that they could like tell their own story. So use images if they want to, or just keep it plain text, or just use a graph or a video, but that would be somewhat flexible. WordPress was very helpful in this sense, in that there is a plugin called Advanced Custom Fields, which helps you to make custom fields. You know, normally WordPress, you just have your title, and you have your content and your featured image, but you can add extra custom fields, and this particular plugin has another add-on which is called flexible content, which basically means that below here, all these parts I'm calling sections, right? So, wrong one. This is a section, and paragraph is a section, and this is another section, and the graph is a section. So I can add a section, and I just pre-program templates, and so I can add a paragraph, add one, and I can, or they can, of course, the editors, they can choose combi photo, no, yeah, all these nice stuff. Oh dear, where is it? And then if I want to, I can, you know, just change the order of things and stuff like that. So that's generated in WordPress, but how does it look like on the front end, and how does Angular play into that? Okay, so the page again is build up of like basically a for loop of all this. You know, we got the post, and the post contains sections, and we just loop sections. And while it's looking through these sections, it is asking, okay, if it's a paragraph, you do this. If it's a large image, you do that. If it's a photo to the left, you do that. Maybe some of you will now be thinking like, okay, if this thing is looping for like these 6 sections on the post, if it's looping through all these things, is it like generating all this extra HTML just because it's sake, because you want to be flexible? And that's the beautiful thing here, it doesn't. If we look, oh dear ski. If we have our section here, we see that it's looping through. We got combi2. You see that only this part is generated in the DOM. So say, for example, if you would like use CSS classes and say, okay, we hide all of the CSS classes and we would only show this one, you know, then all the stuff would be generated in the DOM. But with Angular if, this Angular if one, only this one is generated in the DOM. So, for example, if you're making from this is a different example. Huh? If you're making a website which also has to have like a mobile version, and if you use like this Twitter bootstrap thing, you can just use this class like hidden access, which means that particular block of content is not shown on your mobile screen. And then you can go to the client, look, I made this very special, separate WordPress theme for you. But in fact, it's not really helpful because the smartphone has to load everything, also the stuff that it's not showing. But if you would use this, ngIf, it would not load. All these elements that you don't want to see, they're actually not loading. So you're actually doing what you say, that you're making a linear theme for the WordPress. Am I very close to the end? Huh? A few minutes. Okay. I'll skip this part. I just want to show then something, how it works, because it works down with the data visualizations, which I promised that, you know, is increase interactivity, blah, blah, blah. Oops. How does Angular work with this data visualization? This is basically a map. This is like leaflet, mapbox, and D3 visualization library. And what Angular is helpful in is that I can basically create different states which correspond to different data. So this is the current situation where there's 2 lines. This is the south of Amsterdam for the tram line going to the Amstelveen. And how does the network look like in 2020? So I enter different data, and I also have like a view where I can see like the differences. Another example of the stuff we're doing with the visualizations is this is that we have, you know, they ask for transparency, so I say, okay, what can we not put the entire planning for the construction of a station online? So, you know, they started constructing back in 2004, and this is the stuff that's been happening. And now I can enlarge it, and you know, you can see that, you know, for like the upper part is what's been happening on the street, and the green stuff is what's been happening itself, and the lower part is like the testing stuff, which still got to be. And it's in, you know, very transparent way of opening up the planning. The next, within 2 weeks, I'm talking to the financial guys for the same kind of thing. Maybe you've seen this like a D3 thing, which like the New York Times does with like an Obama budget, where they, it's slow like, I'm really looking forward to work on that one. 3.1 billion, by the way. Okay, so I'm coming to the end. I hope it was interesting to you. I stopped being a developer, and I get back to being the cultural anthropologist, and I just want to, you know, say that, you know, actually being kind of new to this field, I've been freelancing for 4 or 5 years. Before that, I didn't code. It's like really remarkable with all this open source technology and all this shared knowledge on like Stack Exchange and everything. Basically, all the questions I need to ask, I can find answers to. That is kind of unique, wherever in the world. You know, very different than Russian politics or whatever. So we're in a very interesting field.
Okay, so that brings us to the questions from the audience, which gives also some time for Gabriella to set up. But first, a round of applause for Joera. And depending on where the question is coming from, I either bring the mic or you have to repeat it. So questions about WordPress and Angular, or something else? Yes, 1 sec.
Is this Angular version 1 or version 2? Because I've never actually used Angular. I know
1.3 point something.
Okay, so if you wanted to update this in the near future, say to the 3 years, you would have to rewrite everything, because the version 2 is completely different from what I've understood.
This is a concern that's in the market, but what they say is that as the way they present it is going to be very nice, very elegant.
Oh, okay.
Not at least because they did really rethink the whole process, and it's going to be much more interesting, even with all these kind of web components that are coming on the market, and it's going to be like, yeah, it sounds really interesting. But they say that even you can, when you're in, let's say 1.4, you can just take parts of your application and put them in 2.0, so you can.
Oh, okay. There's going to be a way to actually transfer these.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And there is also the like the modules, like the animation part or the router part, which are going to be new in 1.4. They're going to be the same for 1.4 and 2.0.
Oh, okay.
So there is,